That's a kestrel. That is not. That is a kestrel. I'll be right back.
Should I flip the camera?
Okay, I got it. That was probably the best kestrel shot I've ever got. I can't believe you let me get that close. That's crazy. Sorry, I got distracted. What's up, guys? Welcome to another Tutorial Tuesday. Today's episode, we're not talking about birds or kestrels. That's just a side effect of my hobby. Today, we're going back to basics. So we're going to be talking about the exposure triangle, and this is going to be a three-part series. So today, in the exposure triangle, we're going to be talking about ISO. So real quick, if you guys don't know, the exposure triangle consists of three things. So first is a triangle, because it goes like this. That's pretty much a triangle, I'm pretty sure. So it's got three parts. It's got ISO, aperture, and shutter speed. And there's no particular order to those things, but those are the three things that make up the exposure triangle for photography. And in photography, this thing, your camera, or it doesn't matter if it's this or one of these or whatever type of camera, cameras are all big boxes that soak up light. That is their primary objective, and there's three ways that they can do that, and that's with the exposure triangle by using ISO, aperture, and shutter speed together. So I'm going to start today's episode with ISO, and I think that's probably because I get the most questions about ISO concerning the exposure triangle. I think most people can figure out a lot easier what shutter speed and aperture is. So that's why I'm going to start with ISO today. So ISO, what is ISO? ISO refers to the film days when you used to have to load film into your cameras, and it was chemical process. So ISO referred to the sensitivity of the chemicals in the film to light. And we have adopted that to deal with DSLRs, and now it's no longer the film that's sensitive to light, now it's our sensors. So every camera sensor has a sensitivity range that it can deal with for how sensitive it is to light. So usually for ISO, you want your sensor sensitivity to be kind of low, because during the daytime there's a lot of light, and you want that light to have a nice soft touch to your sensor.
There, go on.
But if you're too sensitive of a sensor, then the light, especially during the daytime, will not be so gentle. See, that's too sensitive. So I need to adjust my sensitivity to deal with that amount of light coming in. But with less light, or the sunlight fading, or shade, or dark areas, or anything like that, then you can raise your sensitivity of your sensor to accept more light. So coincidentally, right now the sun is going down and we need to adjust our ISO. So I'm going to have Brittany adjust the ISO on the camera, and you're going to see what I'm talking about. So right now we're at ISO 100, which is the base level for most things, and that's how we want it. But we need to crank it up. So let's crank it up to where it looks good, and then let's crank it up to where it's too high. So now we're at 200, and you can see it's starting to be a little bit bright again, especially in the areas where the light is, but not so much the areas of my face. So now we're going to crank it up really high. Let's crank it up to like 1,000, and we're going to see what that does to the bright areas and then to the shadow areas where my face is. So now I'm probably looking really ridiculous and highly overexposed. And basically, right now I'm very, very sensitive. So don't make fun of me in this state, because again, sensitivity matters. So let's go ahead and reduce the sensitivity and get back to a normal state and a normal ISO for these conditions. So there we are. Camera lady has said that we are at 250, ISO 250 now, so we bumped it up by about a stop or so, and that's going to help deal with the fading light back there and my face, keeping my face well exposed. Alright, sorry about the change up. I had to switch lenses. You could probably see this, oh, you can't see it, as I had to switch lenses. So yeah, this is sunset behind me, and threw up a time lapse just in case. But anyways, let's talk about side effects. So as you might guess, there are probably side effects to being oversensitive, right? Well, that's definitely true with your camera. So there is actually side effects to all three of the exposure triangle components: ISO, aperture, and shutter speed. And each one of those are completely different because we're dealing with a different way of accepting light. But the main side effect with ISO is going to be something called noise. So you probably heard this term before. If you haven't, digital noise is something that's introduced to your sensor and to your images when you have too high of an ISO. This is specifically an ISO related problem, and the higher your ISO goes, the more noise you're going to have. So the noise also comes from the film days, and in the film days when you had a high ISO roll of film, like a 1600 roll of film or something, you would throw that in there and that would introduce something called grain. And grain in film can actually look kind of nice, and we actually try to emulate that these days, which is weird. I'm not going to get into that. But you just know that noise comes from a grainy ISO, which was the film days, and now noise is digital and it looks grainy. The higher your ISO goes, the noisier your image is going to get, and that's going to create two problems. That's going to create the noise that you're going to see and the grainy looking thing that's going to make it look harsh, but that's also going to decrease your overall image quality. So normally when you take photos, the general rule of thumb that people are going to tell you that you're going to hear is you want your ISO to be as low as possible. And that is so that we have the least amount of noise, and then so we have the sharpest image, the highest image quality we can get. The downside of photography though is that that's not always possible. There are situations in photography where we have to up our ISO, and those are things like sports or shooting indoors or shooting in low light, especially mostly low light. And then of course when you do stuff like I do, like astrophotography, and you're shooting out here at nighttime, then you have to have a very high ISO. Some of the ISOs that I shoot with in astrophotography are anywhere from 3200 all the way up to 10,000. Fortunately, these days we can deal with that a little bit better by using software like Photoshop or Lightroom, and we have noise reduction that is fairly easy to use. It's basically just a slider. So you can see here with this image is super noisy, very high ISO, but all I got to do is take this slider and then slide that over and it'll decrease the noise. The downside to this, of course, is the more you slide it, the softer the image is going to look. So it's going to look much less sharp and much less nice, much not nicer, much worse.
Less sharp. It's just going to look soft.
It's just going to look soft. So the other caveat with ISO and digital sensors is that not all cameras are equal in how they handle high ISO. So you may, if you have something like this, you know, your cell phone, the sensor in here is extremely tiny. You know, it's like that big. It's probably not even that big. And then you move up to bigger cameras, and then you move up to DSLRs and mirrorless that are crop sensors, and then all the way up to full frame. So the sensor size is very important in determining how well it handles the high ISO and what you're capable of getting away with. It's not the only factor. There's software involved inside the camera that helps too, but it is a big factor. Is the sensor size is extremely important. The bigger your sensor, generally speaking, the higher ISOs you can handle without them looking like horrible. Alright, so before I keep rambling on, as you may know I have a tendency to do, I think that pretty much wraps up ISO. There is a lot more to it, of course, and there is a lot more to it, especially when you consider integration with the rest of the triangle, but that is for future episodes, and I will get into that and how to pick ISOs for certain scenarios and that kind of thing. So for right now, hopefully that will have been enough to help you get the basic concept of ISO down and help you to figure out how that's going to impact your images and what you need to do to make better images. So if you guys have any questions about anything that I talked about or anything regarding ISO, make sure you leave those in the comments below and I'll definitely answer them. If you haven't already, definitely make sure you subscribe to the channel. I've got new videos every Tuesday and Friday. Hit that like button if this video helped you out. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next episode.